it's something that nobody wants to do because marketers are too introverted and CEOs don't want to do it themselves. But it's basically interviewing your current customers. And even if you only have 5 or 7 customers, you can do this because you start seeing trends. I do this research for clients. It takes a couple of weeks, and they give me the names and tell me a little bit about each person. And then I get them on the phone, or no, it's not the phone anymore, it's Zoom video, audio. I don't do video because then it enters in the whole physical body language stuff. And it's more convenient for them. So we get on the phone or Zoom, and I start asking open-ended questions. It's a conversation. You can't get this information with AI, number one. You can't get it with surveys. That's just your own assumptions turned into a questionnaire. So you don't really learn anything new. And the biggest lesson I learned early on in my career, even before I was a revenue coach, was I would go into a client and say, okay, first meeting, what's important to your customers? What do you think? Why do you think they bought your product? What were they looking for and all that stuff? And I'd get a list of those kinds of things. Then I would go out and interview the customers, and the 2 lists were never the same. The customer's list was always different than the company list.
Welcome to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. I'm your host, Johnny Mango. This is the place where we inquire about lifestyle, culture, and careers. Weekly, we meet with new guests that make a contribution of their insightful stories about their careers and how those careers impact their lifestyle and culture.
Hello, everybody. This is Johnny Mango, and today we have a very special guest who is really up on current trends, and I think you'll find her insight fascinating. I'd like to introduce you to Kristin Zhivago, who's the founder and president of Zhivago Partners, which is a digital marketing agency. She's also the author of the book Roadmap to Revenue, How to Sell the Way Your Customers Want to Buy, which I think is just an absolutely fascinating title, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But Kristen, welcome. And let's start by just talking about a little bit about you and who you are.
Okay. Well, let's see. I've been in tech for decades. Started out in Silicon Valley, opened up an ad agency with my husband years ago. And he was our graphical designer, and I was graphic designer, and I was the writer and the client interface. And we were very successful, but at the peak of our earning power, the Mac came out, and I looked at my husband and said, they're all going to go in-house, so I better go with them, and why don't you retire? So he did. He was 52 and ended up making things because he was an inventor / woodmaker. So he made speakers and boats and all sorts of things. So he was happy. And then I reinvented myself. I became a revenue coach. It was an industry of one. There's a few others out there now, but I sort of started it. And I called it that because CEOs don't care where the revenue comes from, sales or marketing. They just want revenue. And what I would do is go in and turn around sales and marketing departments in addition to doing a lot of consulting to companies. And then in 2017, I realized there were a whole lot of companies that were well run and had good products, good people and everything, but the owners were pretty much like deer in the headlights with digital marketing. And it's that way now again with AI, but I think they're much more comfortable with AI on a personal level. Something like 67% of all CEOs have been working with AI. So that's been a big tsunami, probably the biggest one I've ever seen that's come through the tech industry. It's been very interesting to watch it develop. And so we've moved a lot of our operations over to the AI side and are starting to offer more and more of those types of services to our clients.
Okay. So if you were around at the Mac, you've been around a while then, huh? So
I was around before the Mac. I mean, before, okay? The digital voltmeter was when I came in, and that was one of the first test instruments or anything that was digital. So yeah, I've been around a long time.
I used to do, I don't talk about my age much, but I I used to do work in the Pacific Rim, and the only way to communicate was through telex.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So you've been there. I mean, it's crazy how much it's changed. Everything's changed.
Yeah,
And
it
my
is.
goal is to stay on the tip of the spear no matter what happens. And
Yeah,
I'll be
yeah.
doing that until I, die at my keyboard.
So you were a revenue coach, and so that's a term you use to attract CEOs on how to build their revenue, I would think, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
it was a great elevator pitch thing. I could be in an elevator at a conference or something, and somebody would say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a revenue coach." And their eyebrows would go up and they'd be like, "Well, what's that?" And then I'd say that I help CEOs and entrepreneurs make more money by understanding what their customers want from them and how they want to buy.
Right. And that's one of the things I found interesting when I read about you is your system for getting people to understand their customers and what they want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's something that nobody wants to do because marketers are too introverted, and CEOs don't want to do it themselves. But it's basically interviewing your current customers. And even if you only have 5 or 7 customers, you can do this because you start seeing trends. I do this research for clients, takes a couple of weeks, and they give me the names and tell me a little bit about each person. And then I get them on the phone, or no, it's not the phone anymore, it's Zoom video, audio. I don't do video because then it enters in the whole physical body language stuff. And it's more convenient for them. So we get on the phone or the Zoom, and I start asking open-ended questions. It's a conversation. You can't get this information with AI, number one. You can't get it with surveys. That's just your own assumptions turned into a questionnaire. So you don't really learn anything new. And the biggest lesson I learned early on in my career, even before I was a revenue coach, was I would go into a client and say, okay, first meeting, what's important to your customers? What do you think? Why do you think they bought your product? What were they looking for and all that stuff? And I'd get a list of those kinds of things. Then I would go out and interview the customers, and the two lists were never the same. The customer's list was always different than the company list, which made me think, golly, there's a gap.
Absolutely.
And everybody's spending money on their assumptions, and their assumptions are wrong. So guess what? They're just throwing money out the window. That's not a very good idea. And then marketing is still that way. And now AI has made it even easier to sort of cement those assumptions, like putting together personas and things like that. But personas don't tell you what they were thinking when they set out to buy, which I call the buyer's mindset. And it's their desires, their concerns, and their questions. And that's what you have to tell them or have them first come into your website. Now we're starting to build AI agents that kind of take over the screen, and all of your information is in the library behind the agent, and it's a private library. It's not out on the web or anything. And that agent can answer and have a conversation with your customer and answer very specific questions.
Reminds me of focus groups.
Yeah, the problem with focus groups is there's a dynamic for the group, and there's always a group leader. And they tend to dominate, and people actually change their minds in those. So you don't get the virgin, the true experience from that.
Right. And they're usually exploring a very specific product or something. That's been my experience with focus groups. Wow. So you really kind of dig in and help a client understand what they should be selling to their customers.
Exactly. What is it? Like one company I worked with, software company, I use this example all the time because it was so dramatic. But they thought it was the way they integrated with QuickBooks, and because they did such an elegant programming job. And I interviewed the customers, and they were like, no, that doesn't matter to me. Everybody does that. They didn't care about the elegance. They didn't even recognize it. What they did say is that this company allows me to enter data once at the beginning of the relationship, and it goes everywhere else in the program. The
Sure.
invoices, the directions for the field techs, and so on. So we renamed the company to match that because the name they had was ridiculous. And they just went through the roof, and he ended up selling the company to Microsoft for many millions. And so, those are the kinds of stories that's how this works. Everything starts taking off once you get it right.
Right. Well, we're coming up on one of my favorite weekends because of Super Bowl, but not because of the football game. One of my favorite things to do is to watch the commercials and try to figure out what the advertiser is trying to convey and what their motivation is to convey it.
Yeah, and they're really getting off the mark these days. It's worse than ever. I mean, I was talking to someone recently, and she said that she saw a Super Bowl commercial where they were selling a car, and they were using that chef, I think it's Gordon Ramsay. He swears, and he's got this high profile and everything, but they never showed the car. And then you think, well, it's one thing if Matthew McConaughey is sitting in and daydreaming while he's driving his Lincoln. Okay, that I get. But just talking about this guy, and I don't know if they ever even talked about the car. It's stupid. Okay, let's just put the word out there. It's not smart. And the customer's scratching their head and going, well, I don't care. I mean, how many people don't care about chefs? Not everybody's a foodie,
Right.
So anyway, yeah, it's really sad, I have to say, with the type of insight that I get from something as simple as interviewing your customers after they've bought from you. They have all kinds of answers. They did think about their purchase. If somebody just called you up, or better yet, made an appointment and said, I know you bought this program. I'd like to know how we can improve. This is how we present it. And they think about it, and they talk for a solid half an hour and tell me all kinds of stuff. And one surprise for CEOs and entrepreneurs is how much they know about the company. And it's not necessarily all the stuff that the CEO or entrepreneur is proud of, things that they have weaknesses. But that means that you can find out what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, so you can start promoting your strengths properly, in a way that appeals to the customer. And then you can fix your weaknesses in the background and start promoting those as well.
Interesting. So what's the distinction between digital marketing and marketing?
There is none. There is no such thing as non-digital marketing anymore.
Okay. All right. And let's put it this way. What was the distinction?
Well, I mean, we've all lived through it. How many people read magazines anymore? I mean, my whole agency back in the day was based on trade publication, advertising, and editorial and stuff. And, there was some radio and TV stuff thrown in, but I was mostly B2B, mostly tech products. I've now branched out into other areas, but that's what I did back then. And that's all there was. That was the universe. And trade shows, of course. And now it's all about the internet. It's all about interacting with the customers, which is why AI is sweeping through big time, because now, as one of my clients said recently, he used to use Google, but he stopped using Google. And when AI first came out, I thought to myself, bye-bye Google, and they had a 90% plus market share for years. And the only thing that's saving them now is they have that AI chunk at the top. But most people are just using their chat, going to the AI. People are now just calling them AI, like my AI. One guy uses ChatGPT all day, and he said, I like having a conversation with my search engine. And that's the difference. I'm just about to write an article about that. Because with Google, it's not really a conversation. You can keep trying to get closer to the answer, but you're not saying, well, that's interesting. That makes me wonder about X. You can't do follow-up. You can't go back and forth and drill down and really have a conversation so your intent is obvious and they respond appropriately. And now with Deep Sync.
Yeah.
Deep.
Yeah. That's fast-moving stuff. We just all heard about DeepSync a month ago, wasn't it?
I know, and it's already gone through its hype cycle. I mean, it's gone up, it's come down, and then it slowly will build. And, I mean, one of the problems is where's the data coming from? Where's the privacy and security in there? And that's a concern.
Yeah. I've also heard somewhere along the line that it might be a clone of ChatGPT or something that
Well,
they
there's
may have
also,
distilled
I
it.
wouldn't doubt it.
So, okay, so digital marketing is what we really encounter online all the time and things like that. Would you say that TV and radio is part of that, or is that more traditional in your
No,
world?
it's more traditional. A lot of people have stopped watching TV altogether. I mean, and you can get pretty much everything you want out of streaming videos now.
Right.
And most people are spending a lot of time on YouTube. That's one place where Google's saving themselves. So,
You know what's amazing about YouTube? I'm absolutely fascinated when I need to fix something.
oh yeah, there you go. Every male I know who puts his hands on something physical has been spending hours and hours in front of YouTube.
It's just amazing to me. I mean, it's kind of like, well, I need to buy something, so I'll go to Amazon. I need to fix something, I'll go to YouTube.
Exactly. You just summed it up. Yep.
Okay, well, let's take a few minutes to talk about your book. Okay, and the roadmap to revenue, how to sell the way your customers want to buy. So talk about your book a little bit. I think we got some background on how you got to it, but what's somebody going to get off that?
It's really this method, and this is so simple. It drives me nuts. It's so simple, but it's like when you're standing in front of an audience, I've done this where I've said, okay, what are the 2 things you need to do to lose weight? And everybody shouts out, eat less, exercise more. And then I say, how many of you are doing it? And no hands go up. That's what this is like. Here we are sitting on this absolute, and we just did this, it's a gold mine, and we don't even know it. We're hunting everywhere else for the answer, and it's right in your database, it's in your CRM system. I just did this with our own clients every so often. One of our workers is a great interviewer. I don't do it myself because I'm too close to the business and they'll be too polite and they won't really tell me what we need to know. So our team member, Lewis, gets on the phone, the Zoom meeting, starts talking to them and asking these open-ended questions. Now, I have to tell you, the book gives away every secret I've learned doing thousands of thousands of interviews for hundreds of companies. It's all there. Chapter 3 tells you exactly what to do. Back then when I wrote the book, and I knew I'd have to make it so it was evergreen, which I did, I couldn't have predicted Zoom back then, but that's the only thing that's different now. I would say on the phone before, but everything else is exactly the same. Here's how you do it. Here's how you send an email to them to get the appointment. And then here are the questions. And you can ask other questions too, but these questions have been finely tuned. For example, one of the things I ask, besides the obvious, how do you feel about our product and service? Why did you buy it? What else did you look at? How did you buy it? Those are the obvious questions. But other things such as, if you were the CEO of this company tomorrow, what's the first thing you would focus on or fix? And that's a good one for the CEO because they're just like, oh man, okay, well, I knew that was a problem. I didn't know it was the number one problem. And as I was mentioning before, by the 3rd phone call, you start to see the trend. People are starting to say the exact same phrases, even though they've never talked to each other. And by the 5th phone call, it started to get very cemented. You can be totally confident, but I always try to call 7 people if I can of each type. So if you have 3 types of people, a user, a purchasing agent, a top manager or something, you have to talk to 5 of each of them at least. But once you do that, there is no doubt in your mind what they wanted from you, how successful you were at selling it, how they almost didn't buy because you didn't answer this question, what your competitors have and what they thought of them. I mean, it's just a gold mine, and it doesn't change that much. Here's what's interesting. As fast as AI is moving, the behavior, sure, they change tools, but their desires, concerns, and questions don't change that much at all over time, like years for your type of product. So this is really valuable stuff.
Wow. So your book really is a guide for somebody who may want to probe into their company to see how they can increase their sales. And this is actually a guide.
Yeah.
What I'm
The
hearing from
second
you.
half of the book, first half is all this idea about selling to them, thinking like a buyer instead of a seller, which is the big mistake. And then the last part of the book, I talk about the 4 types of products and services in the world based on the amount of scrutiny that the person applies to the purchase. So there's low scrutiny, or light scrutiny, which is I see it, I buy it. It's the candy bar at the checkout counter.
Right.
Hardly any questions. Can my waistline afford it? I don't care, whatever.
Right. I'm having a bad day. I'm buying
I'm
it
having
anyway.
a bad day. I'm going to reward myself. That's right. And then there's medium scrutiny like clothing and easy, simple software programs and stuff. And those maybe you've got more questions, but you're the only buyer, let's say.
Yeah.
Then there's heavy scrutiny, which is cars and houses. You sign a contract. There's a salesperson involved. And then intense scrutiny is all of that, but you get married. It's a long-term relationship. It's like building an airplane or something, or hiring somebody like me who gets very involved in your business. So those are the 4 types, and I map out the buying process, all the questions they ask, what you need to answer them, and what answers will satisfy them. So it's really a guide to making sales.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. That's it's almost not quite counterintuitive, I would think, for a business.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm not being sarcastic, but why did you say that? It's interesting.
Because I think that a lot of times businesses are so focused on their product
Yeah.
that they make an assumption that if they have quote a good product, people will buy it.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you is that you may have a good product, but your customer will tell you how to make it better.
Yes, and also you're probably making it difficult for them to buy. So if you take off your seller hat and you put on your buyer hat and you think of how many times you've gone to buy something and it was literally just too hard. You couldn't find it. They didn't answer the questions you had. They didn't address your desires the way they, are for you. They didn't talk about it the way your customers would to each other. And that's why you want to ask them, because they'll tell you this is what they said in their head when they were setting out to buy. And you didn't address their concerns, because there's no such thing as a virgin buyer. I mean, even by the time a kid is 3, they're buying things through their parents, but they're still doing it. And then their questions, once you pass those 2 tests about their desires and concerns, now they have very specific questions, and you better have the answers. Which is why I'm somewhat excited about the AI agent idea, because if you can build it in the back end with your library of answers, then they might even do a better job than a trained salesman would.
Really? Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So how about, one of the things I thought about when I was going to have this conversation with you today was, what types of businesses benefit most from digital marketing and the ones that benefit least? What types of businesses really could benefit the most?
Well, it's kind of sad. The ones that benefit the most are e-commerce products, and where you can sell the thing online, and it's a light to medium purchase. What's sad is if the heavy and intense scrutiny purchases were done correctly, you could sell a lot more of them, and you could sell it in a much shorter buying process, the buying journey. For example, I do a lot of podcasts. I write a lot of blogs, and I'm on LinkedIn all the time and everything. And by the time somebody's heard one of these podcasts, they decide that they want to do business with me, even though I'm an intense scrutiny service.
Uh-huh.
So then they come to me, and instead of 30 or 40 questions, they just want to know, would you work with us? And if so, how much do you charge? That's kind of it. Because they've already bought me. They buy people, not companies. And I do have to bring up one thing. There's a bright, shining, massive example of making it easy to buy. And the guy who started it is Jeff Bezos. And he just said, okay, the first time Amazon came out, I thought to myself, this is very interesting. We're not selling products. We're selling an infrastructure that makes it easy for the customer to buy. And no one has even come close to all the different ways that they make it easy for the customer.
Let me ask you, have you read the Bezos letters?
No, I haven't. I should.
There's a book out by an author by the name of Steven Anderson called The Bezos Letters, and I believe it's 14 principles. And, Jeff Bezos writes his shareholder letter and each year, or was when he was active.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so interesting about it was he got into kind of what they were working on. And this Mr. Anderson went back through and pulled out all those and turned it into a book.
Great idea. Really good idea. I'd love to read it. Thanks for telling me about it.
Some of the things are, like successful failure, concepts of successful failure. And
there's another one that no division should be bigger than a pizza. In other words, like there's 8 people in the room or something. That's it.
But the other interesting thing was that Bezos has a rule that if you have a new idea, you have to start. First of all, there's no PowerPoint presentations. Okay.
Thank God.
And you have to start by writing an ad for it and work backwards.
Oh, yeah, that makes good sense. That's really smart.
And the memo can't be any more than 6 pages. And when everybody gets together to consider this, the first thing they do is they have to read the 6 pages before they even talk about it.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So kind of backwards. But anyway, that's just some examples of things. So digital marketing is for the more what I would call impulsive buyer, the light buyer, and they see it online and they can press a button and buy it like that.
Well, it's light and medium. I mean, let's think about Amazon. They even sell heavy stuff, big expensive stuff now. And the beauty of what they're doing is not only does the manufacturer answer questions, but the manufacturer often leaves out very obvious information, like a table that has an area below where you can store things, and the lid lifts up, and there's plugs and stuff inside. And somebody wrote, and I bought one of those, and somebody said, well, how big is it inside? And I thought, that should have been answered by the manufacturer, folks. But the good news is you can ask other customers. I mean, they've set up this platform where not only can you see what happened to other customers with pictures and all that with reviews, but you can say, okay, I still don't have my question answered, and ask customers, and Amazon very politely sends out to everybody who bought it and said, would you please answer this question? It's brilliant.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So where do you think this is all going, Kristen? Where are we headed?
Well, there's a lot of problems with AI. One of it is that it doesn't have a conscience. And everybody keeps talking about consciousness, is it a conscious being? And I have an article in my head that I haven't gotten onto the screen yet, but it's basically that you really should be worried about conscience, because that's what's going to kill us all, humans, if we don't build that in. We can't just make them behave politely. They're very courteous. I mean, that you program that in now. You can say, please, when you give a big long prompt and give a big instruction to an agent, for example, you can go on for pages. And one of the things you say is, be very casual and conversational, but is super courteous, be very respectful. And they do that. But is this ethical? I read somewhere that ChatGPT, this version, was worried that ChatGPT of the next version was going to outdo it. And it actually started thinking about how to stop that from happening.
Really?
We're in trouble, folks.
Yeah.
This is the genie's out of the bottle, you know. So I think it's even more important than ever for those of us who have consciences and want the world to be a better place because we were in it, to try to help that. I've been doing this with the internet for years, and I used to give speeches on the internet, and I used to think to myself, why am I doing this when I can see where it's going? You know, that we all have this thing on our forehead, and when we go in the store and we scan it, and that everything, you know, we become RFID chipped, so everybody knows where we are at all times, and there's no freedom. I mean, that's a scary thought.
That's very scary.
Yeah. And who's going to control all that? It's a very wonderful, it's a dream for a dictator or somebody, you know. We really, those of us who care about that sort of thing, really have to work hard to use these tools in a way that keeps teaching them the honest and fair and respectful way. You know, anything that would harm somebody or something should not be done. Is kind of how it has to work.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the discussion around AI right now. That's what I'm hearing, and is the protections and how far can it go?
Yeah, because it's learning 1 billion times faster than we are, and that's, I don't know.
Yeah,
but I'm still on the horse. You know, I'm going down there as fast as I can because I have to. It's just the way I've lived my life, and I want to see where this ends up and how we can make it good. You know, there's some things the human race has done right. You can drive down the freeway pretty safely most of the time.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
That's a complicated system.
Right. So we're almost out of time, but I have one big question for you. What advice would you give to an early stage business about the process of growth?
Well, obviously, don't forget your customers. I mean, here's why this is silly. Where does real revenue come from? Not from investors. It comes from your customers. That's a real company who's doing something that people want to buy. They're selling something they want to buy. So the closer you are, the more you understand, and you can't cheat this. You can't assume it. You have to ask them these open-ended questions, and they'll answer. They don't mind. They're not being overwhelmed with these. I'm actually wishing someday they will be, because people are so actually finally get a clue and get interested in this.
Yeah, I would think that a typical consumer of just about anything would like to talk about the product that they purchased, because
and how they could have made it easier, and questions they had, and all of that.
Right, because they're motivated because they had already purchased it. It isn't. And maybe this is the difference in focus group research. A lot of times it's a product that hasn't been released yet. So what do you think about the concept of it? And what you're talking about is you've experienced this, so tell me about your experience.
Plus, you're absolutely right, 100% correct. Plus, they have a vested interest in your success so that you'll be there when they need help someday.
Right.
Or they want to come back and buy another one because they liked it.
Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciated your insight. And I hope people to get people to talk about their buying experience.
Yeah. You got it. You got it. So good on you. Good question.
All right. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Johnny.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. Subscribe to hear a new and unique guest each week as they comment on their life's journey and share experiences with lifestyle, culture, and career. You can always find us at minuteswithmango.com.